that drink of water, that drink of Gatorade. How? How can we work toward justice? Those who long for justice identify with the longings and hungers of the poor and the meek and those who weep. We who are not poor have great difficulty identifying with the poor. Some years ago, our church was giving things to families at Christmas, gifts, so they could have a good Christmas. We had a really kind man in one of our churches. His name was George. He was a really good man. I remember, very gracious man. I performed CPR on him when he died. Just the heart of the earth. But one time we were given these gifts, and he had gotten this movie he really liked, and he wanted this family to be able to watch this movie at Christmas. He just loved this movie. And so I remember the day we went and gave these gifts to this one family. They were dreadfully poor. Dreadfully poor. And George was trying to be nice and help them relax. And he put out this movie and said, "Hey, I didn't wrap this. I wanted you to know I got you this movie. It's on DVD. I got you this movie, and I hope you'll enjoy it." And the father just meekly said, "I look forward to seeing it one day." And when he said it and the way he said it, I knew without a doubt why he said it that way. But George didn't pick up on it. These are dreadfully, sinfully, sorrowfully poor people. George just kept talking. And then finally he said, "Well, what kind of DVD player do you have?" And the man looked down, ashamed. He didn't need to be. He said, "We don't have a DVD player. Those things are expensive." George was stunned. He had no idea. It didn't even occur to him. Everybody has a DVD player. To be poor in this world is to be in another country, another world. The poor don't have so many of the options we have who aren't poor. You can't get a Sam's Club membership. You can't, if you buy a car or something, or almost anything, you're going to pay higher interest. You're going to pay more money, even though you have less money. While we shower celebrities with gifts of all kind of things. Doesn't make any sense. If you're poor, you don't have any voice in things. I was once a part of a task force in a county. I worked for the county government. And they had this task force to see how we could better offer services to clients in the criminal justice system. And I was working in juvenile justice, and everybody on the task force was involved in some way or another with working with different offenders, whether they were adults or juveniles. And we sat around this great big table, and I was new. I was a new guy. And I noticed who's missing around this table. All these different people from all these different agencies in the county and the state. Who's not here? The very clients. There's no representation from the very clients we're serving. There could be someone here from probation. There could be someone who was on probation, or someone who had served their time and were there. There could be an addict there, a drug addict, any manner of people who we were serving. And I brought this up. I said, we need someone here like that. And people got upset with me. And they bowed up and said, we do not need them here. What do they know about what's good for them? Well, I don't know. It's only their entire lives dealing with the system. The one people we needed here so we could understand better how to provide services that had any meaning for them were not there. And the majority of them are poor. I never really believed that thing about mostly the poor or incarcerated or whatever until I started working in that system. I'd say 98% poor. To hunger and thirst for justice is to rearrange the way we think about people, about life, about things, and to act differently than everyone else. It's to notice the injustices perpetuated against people as a matter of course, as normal, and to speak to it, to insert yourself into the process, to interrupt the process, to upset the process, and to advocate for change and joining in solidarity with the people. I've told some of you about my friend June. He was an old squatter, didn't know his age. He squatted on a piece of property, in Middle Georgia, South Middle Georgia. If you've heard it before, I apologize, but that's what came to mind. He lived in one home in a crumbling down house. He had no electricity, no water, which meant no plumbing, no kitchen, no lights, no toilet, no sink, no climate control. Can you imagine? Can you imagine living in South Georgia this time of year with no air conditioning? None. When it feels like 107 degrees out like it did today, and no air conditioning. That's how he lived. But also when it got cold, and my northern friends will laugh at the idea of cold down here, and I understand why. I haven't lived up there now. But when it got down cold, he had no heat. And one night I was in bed and it was about 25 degrees outside, which is cold for us. Of course, the next day it'll be 70 by the afternoon. But anyway, at night it got cold. And I thought I was getting ready to just drift off to sleep, and I was praying. And June's face came in my mind, and I went, oh, June's cold. He has nothing. So I got in my truck and I drove over to June's house, and I walked inside and I knocked on the door and I said, hey, June, it's me. He let me in. He said, come on in, the door's open. I walked in and he was asleep between 4 mattresses. He had 2 mattresses on the floor and 2 mattresses on top of him, and he was bundled up in the clothes he had, and he was shivering. I said, June, get up, get in the truck. You're gonna come home with me. It's too cold. And he did. He said, okay. And he got in the truck, he went home and he got a hot shower and he got sleep in a warm bed that night. And so I realized this was just a stopgap, because it's gonna be cold other times. And something needed to be done. And so I thought, I can get him some things. I can get him a solar light and a solar radio that you can wind up to and generate, power, and a propane heater for the cold nights, and a portable toilet that he can use and empty, and toilet paper. And I could build him a nice solar shower outside with a water collector. I could do all these things for him, and he would have a little more comfortable life. So I went to talk to some friends of mine who had been friends with June a lot longer than I had. And I told them my ideas, and they said, you can't do it. You can't do it, William. It's a great idea. And we've tried it before, but it won't work. And I said, but why wouldn't it work? Well, June was an alcoholic. He did a lot of tractor work for farmers, and they'd always pay him in liquor. They didn't have to pay him anything, just some cheap hooch. So he was abused in that way for his whole life. He wasn't treated as a human. He was just treated horribly by those in power. And they said there'll come a day when he'll be so desperate for a drink of liquor that he'll sell whatever he has for $1 so he can just get a drink. And I thought, they're right. That's exactly what he'll do. Wow. Man, what am I going to do? So I went home and I prayed about it, and I prayed about it that evening, and I prayed about it as I was going to sleep. And the next morning when I woke up, boom, I had the solution. It came to me during my dreams. It was such a simple solution. So I had a talk with June, and I told him what I was thinking about getting these things for him, and he became very excited about that. And then I said, but I knew that when he got really desperate for a drink of alcohol, he'd sell everything for that drink. And June said, yeah, you're right, I will. That's exactly what I'll do. He said, I can't help it. I have to have a drink. I have to. I said, I get that. I get that. So I said, I've come up with an idea, or rather, an idea was given to me during prayer. I said, how about you and I, June, enter into a covenant during which I will leave these things for you. And in the summer, I'll come and get the propane heater, but I'll bring it back in the winter. But everything else, you just keep. And in the meantime, whenever you get into a situation where you just have to have a drink and you haven't had a drink of alcohol in a while and you don't have any means to have one, you will let me know, and I will stop whatever I'm doing, and I will take you to the liquor store and get you the liquor you need. That's our covenant. That's what we're going to do. If you'll agree to this, this is what we can do. And June said, okay, that sounds good. I can do that. And I said, great. And I got him all the stuff. And he just loved it. Changed his life. He had light in his house. He'd never had that before in his little room. He always used a smut pot. Remember the smut pots on the side of the road? And they burn filthy oil and it left black soot all over all of his walls and ceilings. Now he didn't have that. He could listen to songs at night, crank up his radio and listen to a song. He loved music. He hadn't been able to do that in at least 2 decades, at least. I wasn't a pastor then. I was a farmer. Really, I wasn't that. I was, who knows what I was. But I often think about that. If I had been a pastor and the church had found out that I did this, that I made this covenant, some people would throw a hissy fit. We have to learn how to think differently as the church. People who would be upset because I provided liquor for this man and the promise of liquor are worried about religion, and they practice churchianity. Churchianity. It has nothing to do with Christ. It has nothing to do with justice. It has to do with maintaining the status quo and control over people. Others will cry out, oh, he's going to abuse you. He'll be showing up every chance he gets for free liquor. From the time I made that deal with June until the time he died was over 10 years. And during that time, he never came to me but once. And that was after 6 years. And he came to me apologetically one afternoon. He said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, William. I have to have a drink. I've tried to get away with it. I can't help it. I'm so sorry to bother you. I stopped what I was doing. I was building a house then. I stopped what I was doing. I said, thank you for coming to me, June. Please don't apologize. You are keeping the covenant. This is the covenant. You would come to me when you needed help, and I will help you. And in the meantime, we'll enjoy our friendship. This is the covenant. Thank you for honoring it and for honoring me. Prior to that time, I would leave drinks at June's house whenever I could. I had a good moonshine supplier back in those days. And on special occasions, I would leave him a pint of moonshine. And for the 12 days of Christmas, he got a pint of moonshine with a red ribbon around it every day of the 12 days. But you talk about that in the church, must be something wrong with that man. He can't be a man of God. Those who seek justice are never satisfied with the way things are. Why? Because what satisfies them is the way of God, and the way of God is love. And June knew he was loved. When I went through my divorce, I didn't get it. I got a purple towel and my old car, my old Jeep. I didn't get anything else. But one thing I'd managed to keep was a note from June. And in that little note, he had gotten my son to write it for him because he can't write. That note said, thank you for letting me know that God remembers me. We define righteousness as piety and doing good. A lot of people wouldn't define that relationship I had with June as my doing good, but I define it as justice. Because he knew that God loved him and that he counts. Loving union with God is only possible through loving union with people, and it's our only goal as disciples of Christ. If loving God looks like loving our neighbor in the way we would like to be loved, then how does hungering and thirsting for justice look like? Well, first we must notice injustice. When confronted with injustice, we don't turn away or thank our lucky stars or make that comment that such a lie, there but for the grace of God go I. Oh, you mean God loves you more? What a lie. We don't turn away from injustice. We face it head on. We look it dead in the eye and we say, I'm getting rid of you. I cut grass for this guy sometimes. He has a little horse ranch and I cut his pastures. He has this really nice equipment, top of the line mowers. I can drive like 15 miles an hour on his zero turns. I mean, it's nice. And one day I was driving down his road and I noticed at the end of his road, there was this nice little house with the grass about 3 feet tall and just really thick. And there was this woman out there cutting grass as best she could with a push mower. And she cut a strip maybe 6 feet wide in a day. Because I went back by and I noticed she was going. I went back the next day and that's all she cut. So I went to this guy and I said, hey, I noticed at the end of the road, this woman, I explained the situation. I wondered if I could borrow your equipment. I'll pay for the gas and go down there and cut it for her. Because it's really bad. It's bad. She had a kiddie pool for her kids sitting in that little space she'd cut. The first thing he said was, where are you talking about? I said, right down the road, right down there. Maybe a half a mile where the road ends. He said, I've never noticed. I go about that way every single day. Every single day. How many times has he looked away? He didn't notice. We have to notice people. We have to notice people in need. And then after we notice, we act. Some of the ways we can act today, one way is protesting. I get kind of annoyed at people who get upset with the protesters going on now, the protesting. Our nation was born out of protesting, even to the point of the destruction of property. To criticize others for being unpatriotic or whatever by protesting is to be a huge hypocrite. We should be celebrating. And we should pay attention and say, what can we learn from this? And maybe I'm going to join in with you when I learn that you're protesting because of the incredible injustice in your life. You know? Another way we can act is through engaging with our legislators, whether they're state or national or local. We can sign petitions. We can write them letters and emails. We can visit with them in person. They're just people. You know, talk to them. Tell them you're not going to put up with this crap. You're going to vote them out. That's another way. Vote. You don't vote for people who are going to benefit you. You vote for people who are going to stop injustice in the world. I used to be married to this woman. We had a Ford Excursion, big old giant gas hog Ford Excursion during the time when George W. Bush was president. And my former spouse and I found out that he had passed legislation that gave a complete write-off to anyone who had tax write-off who had a Ford Excursion. I don't mean a part, I mean the complete, whatever you pay for that thing was a total write-off. Why? Because that's what he drove on his ranch. I was disgusted by that because I was being rewarded for spending money foolishly while people I know and don't know are dying for a crumb of bread. But my ex-wife thought it was great and she voted for George his second term. Justice didn't really matter. It matters to the disciple of Christ, and we show it at the voting booth. We don't vote for selfish reasons. Boycotts, economic protesting, great way to get a message across. That's the heartbeat of America, money, greed. You know, you threaten that, you'll get noticed. Change will come. And then, of course, the biggest way, I think, to fight for justice is to share what we have. We recognize the greed in our lives, our own greed, and what we will do, everything that we'll do to get as much as we can and keep as much as we can while others suffer and not having what they need. We recognize that, and we share what we have. You know, maybe I've shared with y'all that I used to buy houses and rent them out. And on a couple of occasions, I gave them away. Why? Because I could. And there were people who didn't have a place to live. We can give away a lot more than we think. I found that the simplest way, however, to work for justice is to befriend someone, to become their friend, especially if they're a friend who's not in the same socioeconomic status as us or any other, if we're different. To find friends and make friends with people who are different from us. And then through this friendship, we learn from them what they have to deal with just to live. And then we join with them in changing the system. Some years ago, I was driving down the street on a very hot day, and I saw this big man walking down the street, and he was beautiful. He had the blackest skin I've ever seen. He was so black. It was just amazing. And he was smiling, walking with his groceries and smiling in that heat. So I pulled over and I said, man, it's too hot for you to be out walking. Let me give you a ride. And he got in the car and I gave him a ride home, and I found out he had just moved to town that week before, and he took me inside and introduced me to his family, his wife, and they had 4 little daughters, all of them little and just precious, beautiful little girls. And his name was Orlando, and he had moved from Pennsylvania to come down and establish a church in the South. This was in Rome, Georgia. And Orlando and I became friends, and I would loan him my books. I have a lot of theological books, and he didn't have any. And we would go out to eat, and we were friends. I'd go to his house. He'd come over to my house. Our theology differed, but so what? One day the cold weather came, and Orlando called me and said, hey, can you come over here and show me how to work this heater? I don't know what to do. I went over there. We did the thermostat and wiggled it, and I wiggled some things, which was the extent of my knowledge at that point. And I said, I guess it's broken. I guess you have to call the landlord. So he called the landlord, and what did the landlord say? Oh yeah, it works. You just have to pay extra rent if you want to rent the heater. And then I found out that Orlando was already renting the water heater on top of his rent to have hot water. I became incensed. This was an outrage. So I went down to meet the landlord. He owned the Army Navy store, and I tried to reason with him, but he laughed at me and he told me to mind my own business. But you know what? I was minding my business. When Cain killed his brother Abel, and God said, where's your brother? And he said, am I my brother's keeper? God said, you better believe it. You are. Was I Orlando's keeper? You better believe it. As a friend, yes. I'm responsible for him. I'm responsible. We're all responsible for each other. To love each other. So what did I do? This man laughed at me. I went home and I made a protest sign, and I walked the sidewalk in front of his building for several days. And he tried to run me off, but he couldn't because it was public property on the sidewalk. And people would go by and blow their horns and this and that, and eventually it attracted some attention from the news, and the news came by to interview me. Why are you out here? One man walking with a sign that says, justice for Orlando. Do not shop here. And people weren't shopping here. I think they were afraid that they were going to be talked to by me, the crazy man. And then the man who owned the Army Navy store and rented to no less than 200 people, no less, got in big trouble because he had been breaking a lot of laws. And things changed, not just for Orlando. He came out and begged me. He said, look, if you'll just leave, I'll change that for Orlando. He won't have to worry anymore. And I said, you change it for all of them. And he got, oh, I'm not going to do it. I said, you're going to do it. And guess what? He did it. You'd be amazed what you can do when you see injustice and don't walk away from it. The American way of life is not the Jesus way of life. They're not one and the same, and we must choose who we will serve. The Jesus way is concerned with the poor and the homeless, those with bad credit, the vulnerable, the hurting, the lonely, the smelly, those in the shithole countries, the stranger. Disciples of Jesus are consumed with seeking justice and working for it until it rolls through the land like waters, like an ever-flowing stream, and covers the earth. The Jesus way refuses to allow the goals of this world to become our goals. The Jesus way refuses to ignore the vulnerable to advance our own greed. The Jesus way refuses to settle for less when God offers the best. The Jesus way seeks justice for all. And Jesus invites you this day to take up your cross and follow him in this way. And guess what? You will be happy and you will be satisfied. I'm going to end with this Franciscan benediction. May God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears, that was last week's beatitude, to shed for those who suffer pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them, to turn their pain into joy. And may God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in this world so that you can do what others claim cannot be done, to bring justice and kindness to all creation, especially the poor. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.